His name is Jesus, okay? I mean, it doesn't get any more simple than that. That's why sometimes you get second graders and third graders accepting Jesus, okay? Sometimes kids in kindergarten accept Jesus. The solution is, but mankind makes these really messed up, complex problems. But in the end, Paul says, Timothy, you know what you got to do? Preach the word. But then he goes into, the day's going to come, men aren't going to want sound doctrine. They're going to have itchy ears, and they're going to turn aside to myths. And that's what we're dealing with. Some of the most brilliant people on the planet Earth today, and their whole system is based on the belief there is no absolute truth, and even if there was, man cannot know truth, and they're both self-refuting. Both self-refuting. It's like looking to a sheriff for protection and calling for help. The bad guys are around you, you call for the sheriff, and he says, I'm coming, and as he grabs his pistol, he shoots himself in the foot. I mean, he's not going to be of much help to you. And here, we're looking to these guys for the answers, these brilliant thinkers, and they're shooting themselves in the foot right at the outset. What kind of help are they going to offer? Okay? And so in the end, it comes down to more an act of the will than the mind. We're removing, Christian apologists, defenders of the faith, are removing intellectual obstacles and intellectual smokescreen to make it easier for a person to say, you know what, I'm going to choose by an act of the will to acknowledge the truth that Jesus of Nazareth is God and Savior. Okay? What we're doing is needed, but in the end, you can prove Jesus is real to an atheist. The atheist can still choose to say, I will not bend the knee to the carpenter from Nazareth. See, Pascal understood that, the heart and the mind. Descartes was trying to make it the mind only. That's just reducing, it's an oversimplified view of mankind. So we talk about some of the postmodern views. Where I stated they deny absolute truth. Truth is relative to one's community or social group. They don't even, and so each group decides on their own truth, and it's a story, it's a narrative. But there's no meta-narrative. There's nobody who has the perspective who can stand outside of all these communities and their stories and say, my perspective is the meta-narrative true for all communities and stuff. It's really weird too, because there is a way of looking at that as postmodernism, starting out by saying there is no God who has the infallible, perfect perspective, so therefore there is no absolute truth since we all disagree and no one has that perfect perspective, therefore there's no God. So it's like their first premise is their conclusion, and I reject that first premise. The gospel, the gospel is the greatest story ever told, but it's also true. And maybe that doesn't fit into the postmodernist worldview. It's for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. Maybe the postmodernist needs a new worldview, especially since postmodernism claims not to be a worldview. It's anti-worldview. It's supposed to be demolishing all other worldviews, but in itself, by saying there is no meta-narrative, what does postmodernism become? A meta-narrative. And Dr. Chamberlain was pointing all this stuff out in his own words. You know, granted, the guy's not blessed with early colonial English and the mastery of the English language as me and my colleagues from New Jersey, but in his own way, he was saying the same basic truths. Postmodernism, since they throw reason out the window, it focuses on meaning, feelings, and the will. Okay? Anything but reason. Okay? And it focuses on community. See, they're not individual relativists, but they're cultural relativists. I mean, they have so low of a view of human reason that individuals aren't even... an individual is a zero except as molded by his or her community. Okay? Now let me say something. Postmodernism gave birth to political correctness, which gave birth to a whole bunch of postmodern communities. The gay community is a postmodern community. Okay? And these communities, they come with their own theology and their own view of history. So now we have a gay theology. Okay? Which can be any number of things, including, since John rested head on Jesus' shoulder, they must have been homosexuals. And David and Jonathan were homosexual lovers. And do these guys really believe that's historically accurate? No. But in postmodern circles, even the historian who records the history is never honest, because he is molded by his community. So as we deconstruct the text, we have to deconstruct it along the lines of the narrative that our community gathers around, because that's what molds me. And so if you're part of the postmodern gay community, guess what? Jesus is the greatest proponent of gay rights. If you're a part of the postmodern Marxist community, communist community, through liberation theology, Jesus becomes the greatest Marxist revolutionary who ever lived. Historically, if truth is real, they don't have a leg to stand on. But their first premise is there is no absolute truth. So I got a blank check here. See, this is not rational arguments. This is Nietzsche's will to power. I want my story. I accept my story not because the facts lead there. There are no facts. I accept my story because I passionately want it to be true, and my community passionately wants it to be true. Okay? And now if we get enough power, baby, we're going to cram it down the rest of the world's throat with passion. That's ugly. Well, they're talking about deconstructing modernists and these tolerant Christians. Postmodernism, in its attempt to destroy all other worldviews, is becoming the most intolerant worldview in the history of mankind. They focus on beauty, mystery, narrative stories, okay? Deny absolute morality. You know, whenever somebody denies absolute morality, you know what they're doing? They're looking up to us Christians and they're saying, look, you, sir, are wrong to call my actions wrong, because there's no such thing as wrong. No, if there's no such thing as wrong, Christians are never wrong. Leave us alone, please. Okay? You know, there's no such thing as right and wrong. Therefore, Christians are wrong to teach that there's such a thing as right and wrong in the public schools. We've got to get the Christians out of the public schools. No, if there's no such thing as right and wrong, then it's not wrong for Christians to stick their noses into the public schools. Okay? I mean, it just does not